speaking today with Don Wildsmith. He is currently the Cultural Arts and Main Street Director for the City of Winder. He has done that after retiring from 30 years in the Navy. But what we're here to talk about today is that he served in Vietnam, and when he was in Vietnam, he was in the Army. And he is the recipient of a total of 3 Purple Hearts,
yes.
2 received in Vietnam, so we have a lot to talk about. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing in Vietnam then in the Army. What was your service? What did your service entail?
Well, I was an Army medic, and I served with what we call dust off, which was medical evacuation. It was a medical company that had helicopters. In our case, the small detachments were we had 6 helicopters, and the crews for each, and pilots and maintenance people, and basically they were the unarmed, the things you see now, unarmed, big yet white square with a red cross on it. And we flew out and we did everything from routine pickups to on injured people. We covered some supply flights, like if a fire base needed supplies, needed medical supplies especially, and then we did, our primary function was to act as an air ambulance. We went out and picked up injured, wounded, Army, ARVN, whoever from the field, sometimes in peaceful situations and other times in hot LZs.
And I'd heard that the helicopter service in Vietnam was fairly dangerous, especially if you have 2 Purple Hearts. Why don't you tell us about each of the Purple Heart incidents and what you were doing?
Well, the first one was very simple. I broke, it's a standard rule, you know, when the helicopter touches the ground, because there's a pilot and an aircraft commander in the front, there's a crewman and a medic in the back, and when the helicopter touched down, the pilots are spending all their time watching their peripheral vision, and in the front, and the crew in the back is watching theirs, waiting for the patients to be loaded on. Well, there was a young man running across the LZ who was definitely having trouble running, and he got about 25, 30 feet away from the helicopter and just collapsed. And I hopped out, ran over there, grabbed him, and you have to understand, I've bulked out a little bit since I was in Vietnam.
That is hard to believe.
Oh, trust me, I have. I weighed next to nothing. I was, when my wife and I got married, the year after I got back from Vietnam, I weighed right at 100 pounds because I had malaria and things like that. So, but I was probably at no more than 110, skinny little guy. And so I ran out and grabbed this guy and was attempting to throw him up over my shoulder, which never worked. When we think it was a mortar round went off behind us, and I got shrapnel in my back, in my legs, and in my butt. You know, I mean, it's a big target. In my case, when you're that skinny, it's the biggest target out there. But so we got him.
You were able to get him back on.
Yeah, we got him back on the helicopter, and the problem, most cases when you pick these people up, you either got a good feel, or a bad feel about how they were doing. But a lot of times we never knew. You never knew what the ultimate condition of them were.
Well,
and
you obviously turned out okay after that one because you went back again, and you were telling me earlier there was an amazing coincidence about how you were treated.
When we got back, we landed at a little fire base at a place called Duc Pho, which is south, probably 150, 200 miles away from south of Da Nang, which is where most people are aware of. And it's right in the central highlands of South Vietnam. And we landed in this little fire base, and it's a big mountain that had artillery on top of it and everything. But there was a little small clinic there. And we landed in there, and they took the patients off. And then I hobbled on in there. And it was difficult. You had to sit on this thing. And it wasn't a big piece of shrapnel, but it was kind of uncomfortable. So we went in there. And they had a new doctor in there who had just gotten in country, and so I met this guy, and it was fairly interesting. We're leaning over the table, and he's working on my behind, and you know, many years ago I would have been embarrassed by behind, but I don't care anymore. But so I'm working on this thing, and never thought a thing about it, and you know, clean it out, dress it. They would sew some shrapnel wounds if they were clean, if they weren't dirty and all this stuff. They go ahead and sew them up after they cleaned them out, even though technically on paper you're not supposed to, but it's better to take a chance with what little bit of infection's in there than to sew it, you know, leave it open and get worse. So they used wire. So they put a little piece of wire, like a staple and all in there, and did it and all. And I thanked the doctor and went on my way, didn't think anything about it. It just so happens this particular doctor ended up, let's say that would be about 4 or 5 years later, he ended up delivering my daughter.
And was this here in Georgia?
He was in Winder, Georgia. John House. He now lives on St. Simon's. But
well, amazing. Were you both Georgia natives? Is that how you?
no, I ended up in Georgia because I was stationed at Hunter Army Airfield when I was going through some training, and I went to a Methodist youth group, and across the room I saw the absolute most beautiful pair of legs I've ever seen in my life, and I married her. 4 or 5 years, 4 years later I married her. But
and he just happened to.
And he was in practice. He had been in Savannah. Yeah, his family was from around Savannah. His wife was from that area, so they ended up here, and he was in practice. And
that's an amazingly small world story.
Oh, it's just kind of freaky.
It really kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell us a little bit about what happened when you got the second Purple Heart.
We had a call for a downed pilot, and anytime there was a call for a downed aircraft, because regardless of whether it was Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, whatever, aviation just sort of stuck together because, and it's always been that way. I think since the first time, military embraced aviation and flight, I think we've always watched out for each other. But we had a call for a downed pilot, and another reason you do that is because when you're a pilot, or when you're in an aircraft, you're alone. I mean, when you're an infantry unit, there's always some grunts with you and some other people, but when you're in a pilot, you're in the middle of nowhere. So we got a call and we got scrambled, and I had gone to a crash rescue course when I was stationed at Hunter, and it was just fortunate. So I told the crew chief, who usually goes down on a hoist so they can get the pilots out. I told him we got there if we needed to. I was going down on it because I could get the pilot out. We got out and he was out of the pilot. It was a Marine Corps pilot. He'd gotten out of the aircraft, but I'm trying to remember. I think it was his left side. He had been injured fairly badly. I think he had a punctured lung, so I taped him up, wrapped him up as best I could. We dropped it. It's called a jungle penetrator. It looks like a great big, looks like one of those cones, those orange cones they use in the middle of the road, but when you drop it down,
Pylon, yeah.
Yeah, you pull the lever on it, and these 4 legs hop out.
Huh.
And so basically you sit on one of those legs, you wrap them around there. So I strapped him to that. I got on the other end, and they started pulling us up, and people started running out of the woods and shooting at us. And so fortunately for him, we had spun to the point, because he couldn't do anything. He had, by that time, his blood loss was getting pretty nasty. So he had just about passed out once we got him on the penetrator. And so we kind of rotated around, and I ended up getting, had a round inner, you can't see it. I had a round inner right in through here and came out over there. And at that time, the way I was holding him, it went, I have a ticklish spot right in here where I hit it, right in here, and came out over there. Unfortunately, it didn't hit anything, And and then I got grazed on the back of my leg. And so they just pulled us on up in there, and I spent 2 days in the 12th Surgical Hospital after they were watching me and all this other stuff. But it was interesting. It was strange.
Many people would call what you did heroic, because you really went in and rescued someone. That's the cliche, no man left behind. But really, you were really in the thick of that. How do you feel about that?
It was
now?
It was funny because we didn't think about it. And I did when I came back, when I retired from the Navy. I'd gone to nursing school in the time I was out before I went in the Navy. And while I was in the Navy, I was a hospital corpsman there, and I took all these courses, and I got my degree from George Washington University. But I came back and I wanted to use my GI Bill, so I went to UGA, and in one semester I got my Bachelor of Arts, and then I went on and got my MFA. But while I was there, I had to take a history class. So Dr. Pratt's class, and we were talking about different things, and all these kids were asking us about, when did Vietnam and all this stuff. I said, you had to be there, because when I went to college, I did it 1 year in college before I was informed I was about to be drafted. And I didn't have bad grades, I didn't have good grades, I just had grades. But I guess 60% of the guys in my class got drafted out of that freshman year, and we just knew you were going to get drafted. And so Vietnam, I talked to other people. I've since been in different combat situations and different wars and all, but it was different at that point because it was that you just didn't think about it. You just, I don't think we had.
Because we were young?
Well, I think we were young.
The sense of invulnerability?
Yeah. And
It obviously didn't scare you away because you went on to be a lifer in the Navy.
Yeah, but it's one of the points that I realized. You get to a certain point and you realize that at a point in time, you are doing something that you are very, very good at. And especially in a situation like that, like when you go, like on going down in that situation, or running on a ship when you're going to a place where someone's injured or sick or something like that, or serving with the Marines, because I served with the Marines as a hospital corpsman. It's the point that you think about that in that particular area, wherever you are the one person who needs to be there at that time. I mean, it could be somebody else, and they would be the one person that need to be there. But I never thought about it doing heroic. I've been awarded, I've been given awards for things like that. But you always think about other people being heroic. I mean, I remember thinking, before I retired, my last tour in the Navy was in Okinawa, and I served as a hospital corpsman at the hospital, and then with the 3rd Marine Division there. And Bob Bush, who was a hospital corpsman in World War II, retired. He was the youngest at that time. He was the youngest person ever to receive the Medal of Honor. He got it in the Battle of Okinawa, and he got it on his 16th birthday. He lied big time about his age. And he came back to Okinawa, and I had heard about this guy my whole life. He was like a hero to everybody. And so I had to guide him around the island, for 4 days. And I'm talking to him, and he's talking about, oh, yeah, just all this. And I said, what about it? This is just strange. I mean, all these things you did, and you weren't really old enough to know what the heck you were doing. He said, that made it a whole lot easier. But he did the same thing. He would talk about it, said, oh, no, I'm not a hero. And I know some of the guys that flew in my unit with me who did things vastly more than I did. But the advantage is that I can't call myself a hero because I got out of it. They didn't. Some of them did come home. So, but it was interesting the way you look at things that way.
Yeah. Before we have to wrap up, give us a little overview of how then being in the Vietnam War affected the rest of your life. What did you learn, and how did it affect your life that you think might have been different than if you hadn't been there?
I think that it has made me, now I realized later in life that I have depending on who you're talking to, either a small or a very large touch of attention deficit disorder. But then there's another part of my life where the people will definitely tell you I have over-attention disorder. I get obsessed about some things. Some things I don't worry about. Probably some things that, I should pay a little more attention to that I'm not concerned about. But as I told you earlier, I've developed one theory in life is that I will tolerate a lot out of a lot of people. I put up with a whole bunch of stuff because there's a whole bunch of stuff in life that really doesn't matter. You don't need to get upset with. There's several things I want because I think it's because of living in that closed environment, both in the Army and when I was in the Navy. I won't tolerate a thief. I won't tolerate a bigot. And you can't help it if you're uneducated or you don't have a chance to get an education. Can't help it if you're limited in your ability to learn. But stupid is self-inflicted. And I do not. As a friend of mine once taught me, I don't brook stupid real well. If you act stupid, then I feel obligated to point it out to you.
What about the emotional impact? And to this day, you were talking about, you kind of learn, you do have to move on. Some people have more problem moving on. It doesn't seem
they have,
you have.
And I've fallen back on it. I mean, there's times when I've been in situations where I said, I just don't think this is going to work. This is not going to happen. And I look back and I said, that's crap. Pardon me. But I didn't say that, actually. But anyway, I look back on it and I said, you get in worse situations. You can handle this. You can do this. And I have a tendency to run towards, as it's an expression, run towards the guns. My CO used to say, you're not supposed to do stuff like that. You're supposed to stay back so if people get hurt, they can come to you. I said, why should we make the extra trip? Why don't I just go to them and bring them back and all that stuff? But it's been I am, my daughter, we talk of the phrase in my family about the Hallmark moment. You know, if don't watch Hallmark commercials because Dad'll get a little misty there, you know. I lost a very dear friend, Fred the Wonder Dog, several months ago. And about the time that Fred died, suddenly, I mean, he was an older dog. He just dropped dead suddenly, and we missed him very much. And he was my good friend, and you know, he and I bought a truck together, so things like that. But since that time, all the the TV stations, the national news media would have some little thing about a dog in it and all this sort of stuff. And I'd get up and walk out of the room, and Dana's sitting over there going, didn't say any word, you know. But I do have a tendency. I'm a little more emotional about things like that, you know, and
A little sentimental.
yeah, I am a little sentimental. It's I'm not ashamed. As I told the kids in Dr. Pratt's history class, I said, there are times when we do things that we shouldn't. And whether we were supposed to be in Vietnam, whether we were supposed to be in Iraq, I have no doubt we're supposed to be in Afghanistan. It's just one of those things that needed to be done. Maybe it needed to be done differently, but, and I'm not going to get into the wheres and why-fors and all this other stuff, but the bottom line is somebody asked me to do something, and I did it. And I got an opportunity, and I think you'll find out from a lot of the Vietnam veterans, and I'm sure if you go to other generations and different works, you're going to find, you know, for that brief amount of time, however long it was, and in some cases that time that I was in Vietnam seems like just a few minutes. And other times it seems like, my God, this thing will never get over with. You know, but for that brief period of time, you were doing something where you knew exactly what you were supposed to do, even though you didn't know what was going to happen from day to day. I think we spend too much time with our lives and completely planned out. And every now and then you just got to say, you know, what the heck, and jump right in. And I am a better person, I think, because of not just Vietnam, but my whole military service and everything. You see something in other people that you don't see during peaceful situations. During an emergency situation like that, you see things that people shouldn't have to do, but they do them.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us about this experience. I kind of think I'm pleased to meet a Renaissance man, it seems like.
Well,
So.
I've never been, I've been called quite a few things, but Renaissance man has never been on that list, I think. But thank you very much, Mary Kay. It's wonderful to be here. And it's nice to be asked. It really is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for the program. I appreciate it.